Ray. I am a board member with Positive Women's Network and um, co-chair of the Black Women Living with HIV Work Group. If you don't know, we started this at the last summit, and the mission of the Positive Women's Black, uh, PWN's Black Women Living with HIV Work Group is to be a collective voice for Black women living with HIV to articulate our unique needs for holistic wellness, education, and advocacy. We have a regular conference call on the second Monday of the month at 4 p.m. Central Time, so figure that out in your time zone. But we'd love to have you to join us. And we're really excited this month to be presenting, because one of the goals of the Black Women Living with HIV is kind of to balance advocacy with self-care. And so we're really excited to present this webinar on self-care for leaders, how to create sacred spaces. So we have a fabulous presenter, and if you go to the next slide, a fabulous presenter, Bree Ann Campbell. Bree is a Black woman of trans experience living with HIV in Detroit. You guys can see this. I just need to tell you, she is a fabulous sister. She's on the board of PWN, and she did this a little bit of just creating sacred spaces at a board retreat in October in Oakland, and we knew that this was something we needed to bring to y'all, for you guys, and offer to others to see as an option for self-care, healing, and how to take care of yourself, even when traveling. I'm sure she'll talk about that. But she is executive director of the Trans Sister of Color Project in Detroit, a needs-based organization created by trans women of color. And so we're excited to have you, Bree. And as Vanessa said, if you have questions, place them in the chat box. We're going to go through the presentation, and then Bree will take some questions on the end. So Bree, just honored to have you, sister.
Thank you, Vanita. Welcome, everyone. Thank you also, Vanessa, as well. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So I'm Bree Campbell. Not going to go into the details of who I am after that wonderful introduction. So I really want to start off this webinar by really setting the intentions on why we're here, right? So I know that as Black women who are doing this work, we are constantly juggling loads of responsibility, right? From family, friends, to try to take care of ourselves, right? And also try to make sure that like we're really involved in a lot of the movement work that we're doing. So first, I want to honor every person who has actually tapped into this webinar and allow people to really understand that this is the first step in taking care of yourself, and that I want to also remind people that taking care of yourself looks different for people. So although we're doing this webinar and we're talking about a lot of the practices, also remember that we're talking about practicing, right? And so there's no wrong way to practice self-care. So I want to start off with that. So the first intention is we want to slip into the gap. So I know that in our lives with all the busyness that happens, right, it's really hard for us to like really just center ourselves, right, and to be comfortable with like what centering looks like for us as individuals, right? And so when we're talking about the gap, right, it's that place where people feel like that it's the most conducive place for us to like heal, meditate, take care of ourselves, right? And I want to remind people that in slipping into that gap, right, that we don't have to be perfect. So don't always feel like that you have to like be in a quiet space, or the spaces have to be set up in a way in which that is conducive to healing, right? We can heal anywhere. But just also reminding people that, you know, sometimes it's just really hard to like slip into that place of surrounding yourself in silence, right? And so the first intention is to slip into that gap, right? But also know that that gap looks differently for us. Second intention, release your intentions and desires. So as a Black woman, one of the biggest challenges for me in taking care of myself was that I had these intentions and desires, right, that didn't necessarily reflect how my body needed to heal, right? And so when we're talking about like intentions and desires, remember those are our own, right? And really honor our own individual intentions and desires, right? And leave the other intentions that people have when it comes to like healing and the desire for us healing, like at the door, right? Release those intentions and kind of just slip into a place of like trusting yourself and trusting the universe and giving you all the tools that you need to take care of yourself. 3, remain centered in a state of restful awareness, right? And so when we're talking about centering, right, also reminding people that that looks different for people, right? And when we're talking about restful, right, you want to be comfortable, but you also want to be aware of your surroundings. You want to be aware of the things that you're hearing, right? Be aware of your breathing, because that's also important. And just, you know, make yourself just really aware of your surroundings and take in those surroundings as well. Number 4, detach yourself from an outcome. So most people, when we're talking about healing, right, we expect to be able to like ask for those things, right? And they're supposed to happen immediately, right? Healing is a process and it takes time, right? And so just really detach yourself from the outcomes that you expect to get from this webinar to really take in the fruitfulness of the information that we're going to be giving you all. And then number 5, which is one of my favorites, let the universe handle the details. And what I mean by that is just, I think a lot of times we spend a lot of energy worrying about and trying to fix things that we can't handle, right? And so just as I feel that this webinar was put in place by a higher power at a time in which we needed it, right? Just remembering that, you know, let the universe handle the big details, right? And it's really our responsibility to like glide into that. And I'm hoping with this webinar that you'll have some tools to be able to allow the universe to do its work, right? And feel at peace with it. Also, there's a link at the bottom if anybody wants to get a little bit more information on these intentions. I borrowed them from the Deepak Chopra website, and they can give you a little bit more details along with some other tips and tools that you can use on your self-care journey. So my story, this is one of my favorite photos. The water is very healing for me. So start off with that. As someone who is constantly looking for new ways to heal, I've always known that like water has been one of one of my conductors, right? And so this picture was taken on the Detroit River. That's Detroit in the background. I had my rap on at the time because I was, you know, practicing rapping full time. So this picture just really reminds me of just my own personal healing journey. To give a little detail, so I was diagnosed with HIV in 2010. It was an interesting journey for me because at that time I was a mess. I was really involved in religion, church, Christianity, and I had been doing that for a long time. And then my body got to the point where it could no longer continue to lie to myself or the world about who I was as an individual. And so throughout that transition, I just realized that like the community and the connections that I built in church weren't conducive to my life as a trans woman. So I had to make a decision: did I want to thrive and survive and you know, do great things in my life, or did I want to be in a space where I just felt like I had to hide things about me that were really important and really magical? And so I was in this journey of like just kind of finding myself. I converted to Islam in 2010. And that was an interesting journey because for a long time, I lived my life as a stealth woman, right? So like I wasn't open about talking about my trans identity or even as being a person living with HIV. So for me, how self-care really got, how I really got the message about taking control of my own personal self-care, I was doing work with Positive Women's Network. So like literally my name and my image was everywhere, and people started to find out that I was a person living with HIV, which was something that I don't have an issue with like disclosing to people, but I think it looks really different when we're talking about like the ways in which that our like stories and our images are marketed, especially in the age of social media. So there were people who I felt like didn't really understand the nuances of what it was for me to be like a trans woman living with HIV, right? But who also had this information. So I felt embarrassed and ashamed. And so I stopped going to the masjid, I stopped praying, stopped covering. because I felt like that, I was now like not only like bringing shame to like my community, my Muslim community, right? But also like I felt like that people had already found out this really personal information about me and started sharing it in a way that I wasn't invested in trying to like sway or change people's opinions about who I am as a person. It's too much energy. And so I was depressed, and I went to a conference, and there was a wonderful healing collective there by the name of Harriet's Apothecary. They're a queer-led Black women's group out of New York City. And I just remember just being so in awe at these women, Black women who were like strong and powerful, who were like navigating the world as if like, I say white woman navigating, right? As if they had no care in the world, right? And I remember wanting a piece of that, and I was sick at the moment too. So like my body was just going through a lot of things, and I was just really emotional. And when the conference was over, the women from Harriet's Apothecary gifted us with a healing box. And in this box, there were like several different tools that people could use in order to start, you know, taking care of themselves a little better. And I remember taking this box and feeling emotional because one, like I said, I feel like the universe deposits things in our lives exactly when we need it. And so here I was, a black trans woman living with HIV in a different state, and like the universe already knew what I needed before I even asked for it. And so that box really helped me start to really think about just healing for my own personal self, right? And also it gave me the courage to start practicing some of these things that felt really natural to me, but that for whatever reason, societal reasons, you know, your own personal reasons, that I just didn't really feel comfortable being able to practice. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the session. So like literally this was like 1.5 years ago, and I've been on my self-care journey since. One thing that I will say about it is not only do I feel better as an individual, right? But people can see that energy, right? And constantly ask me like, how are you healing? Like, how are you, you're so amazing. Like, how are you glowing, right? And so then it gives me the opportunity to, again, share these tools with people who may not have access to them. And I'll talk a little bit more about just how that journey has been for me personally. So I want to open this up to questions from the group, or answers from the group. So I want to kind of get an idea of like how folks are healing in the moment, right? So I know that I didn't give really any context on like what healing looks like, and the reason why I didn't do that is because healing looks different for everyone. So I was wondering if people had a couple of thoughts or anything that they would like to share about how they're personally healing or how they've seen other people heal.
And so I guess people are going to be able to write that in the chat box. Is that?
Chat box, yes. I'm looking at it now, yes. And everybody is saying hello to everyone. I see we got a group from Michigan. Hi, Michigan group. Yes. I'm scrolling through the questions, or sorry, through the comments. I think everyone is just really saying hello to everyone at this point. Ooh, okay, got one, yay. So deep breathing, using a relaxing meditation session each morning. So that's good. So deep breathing is one, meditation, and ooh, this is a good one. Learn not to fret about things that you cannot change. Earlier we talked about letting the universe work itself out. So that's a good comment, thank you. I see a comment, there's an app called Unwinding Anxiety that a person is finding very helpful. Unwinding Anxiety, cool, thank you for that. Forgiving yourself, so self-forgiving, being in a place of like self-forgiveness. We have swimming, yoga, and meditation. This one is cute. Singing, music, and my husband. And then the last comment I'm going to take is I see someone says that they heal through positive affirmations. Singing and dancing is a good one as well. So thank you for all of those suggestions. And throughout the webinar, I'm going to be asking people to provide like feedback to make this a little bit more interactive. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. So I'm going to take this last one because it was really important. So someone expressed that they were confused and in extreme pain daily, and they were diagnosed with the condition, and they are willing to learn what they can do to not take so many opiates. Okay, cool. So we want to talk a little bit more about alternative medicine, which is good. Cool. Thank you for that. And then I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so this is just a brief introduction of the different modalities that people can use to heal, right? And so as you see on the left, there's a picture of a woman burning sage. Sage is one way that people use to take care of themselves, right? And so I like to burn sage because it's ancient, right? People have been burning sage forever. And one thing that I really like about sage, especially as someone who's living with HIV, is the actual smoke from the sage is actually an air purifier. So for me, not only does it clear negative energy, right? So like burning sage can also like, just take away some of the negative effects and the negative residue that the world like puts on us every day. Oh, I'm sorry. My mouse fell. So I'm going back. Give me a second. Okay, cool. And so for me, I think sage is like a two-pronged deal, right? Because not only does it like clear that negative energy, but also it allows me to be in a lot of spaces that may not be like healthy for my body, right? And so also to just give a quick reference, sage can be burnt, right? And then they also have sage sprays for people who don't like the smell of smoke, right? Or for people who can't burn sage in spaces for whatever reason. So I have a bottle of sage that I actually carry with me through the airport, small little travel size, right? And so like when I'm getting that negative energy, or I feel like I need just an energy cleanse, I could spray it and get that same effect, right? So there's different forms of sage and different ways in which to use it. She's burning it. In the middle picture, you see a tray with various stones, crystals, as people call them. And so crystals come in different shapes, sizes, forms. You can get them small, large, extra large, right? They have different price points. And not gonna get into the whole details about crystals because you can do your own research. But for me, I think crystals are just really helpful. They're a really helpful way for you to be grounded. And depending on the actual crystal, depends on the energy that it gives out. I like to use crystals as not only like decorations on my altar, right? But I think they're really convenient when you're like traveling and you need like a good boost of energy. So like I said, you can find these in like different sizes and shapes, right? One of the things that I find really helpful and something I've been challenging myself to do with crystals is that we have this idea where like, I need love in my life, right? So let me find a crystal for love, right? And that may work for people, right? But I tried my hardest to like move away from this idea that I'm looking for something, right? And kind of like challenging myself to go into a place that actually sells crystals and just kind of like look, feel, touch, and grab energy, right? And so instead of buying crystals based on what I need, buying crystals based on what they provide for me in that moment, right? So it's totally just opened up my own personal collection of different crystals, crystals that I never would have thought in a million years that I needed. I actually have one in my hair right now that actually, this is really dope. So I bought this from a Black woman at Pride. I don't know if you all can see it. It looks like the world. It's jasper. And I remember one day just Googling it and was like, is this real? Like, I don't know if it's real. So I just Googled the color of it and it popped up and I was like, oh, that's my stone. And it represents balance, right? And so I wear it in my hair. I called it the weight of the world before I even knew what it was, right? Because I was like, it's a globe, it's cute, right? So it's just really good to like have that reminder that, you know, even when I don't feel balanced, like I have this charm in my hair that can remind me to like calm down or, you know, balance me. So I definitely encourage people to shop based off of what the universe can provide for them, not based off of what they need. And then on the right, we see a wonderful Black woman doing yoga, right? And so the connections to our bodies are really important, right? The energy that flows to our body needs those positive connections, right? So yoga is also another healing modality that people can use and that people use on a regular basis to take care of themselves. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about physical modalities. We see the picture of the women doing yoga. Yoga is a really great exercise. It really helps you stretch out parts of your body that are not active and that we don't use on a regular basis. And I know for me, I feel the personal benefits of actually performing yoga. But some other physical modalities that people can use are deep breathing. I don't think people really understand the power that comes along with like controlling your breath and taking in those deep breaths. And this is a modality that I use on a regular basis. I fly a lot and I get anxiety, especially during turbulence. So instead of screaming and like freaking out, like I take deep breaths to the point to where it might bother the person who's next to me, right? And they're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm just breathing," right? But those deep breaths really calm me. And then also, talking about deep breaths, people who are like juggling a lot of things and get overwhelmed, as someone like myself, I find deep breathing really helpful to like clear my mind. So like literally just stopping and like taking a couple of deep breaths to kind of give my mind a minute to like stop and think about it, right? And then restart all over again. So deep breathing is like one of those things that I just don't think people really take advantage of on a regular basis. Meditation is a really good modality, and like I said earlier, meditation could be any and everything, right? It could be prayers, right? It could be a chant. It could just be you sitting alone in a room by yourself, right? And so also challenging people to just think outside of the box and really about what these terms really mean, right? Meditation really just means like coming to yourself, right? And so like I know as someone who meditates often, I meditate the same way at home, but when I am by myself, as I meditate the same way that I am when I'm in the office surrounded by multiple people, right? And it just, you'll figure out what works for you as you continue to practice. We talked about yoga, doing these awesome yoga poses, and it's really good for like body health too. I don't think people really understand the benefits that people receive from yoga. My sister recently just had a baby and she did yoga throughout her whole entire pregnancy. And like, I'm not gonna just attribute it to the yoga, but my niece is like so happy and she's so giggly and so like just full of life and energy, right? And so I would hope to believe that my sister making those positive decisions and deciding to take care of her body allowed her to produce a happy, healthy baby, right? And exercise. Exercise is another modality that people can use. It could be walking, doing pull-ups in your house, doing push-ups, right? Anything that kind of gets us active, right? I'm pretty sure as people who are moving and shaking the world, right, we exercise a lot, right? So just kind of reminding people that like taking care of there's tools that we are already in practice and using and taking care of ourselves, right? And also it feels really good to like recognize like when people exercise and you feel better about yourself, right? You might lose a little weight, right? These are all good things, right? That people all want from exercise, right? And so like, I also look at the rewards of actually participating in something as being like self-care, right? So if you really decide that you want to take care of your body in whatever way that you want to do it and you accomplish those goals, are you not taking care of yourself? Earlier, people mentioned dancing as another modality too. I think dancing brings a lot of people joy. I'm not a dancer myself, so I'm not going to judge it, but but definitely thank you all for the nuggets of wisdom that you all have given us too. So we're going to move on to mental modalities. which anything that's like in here, right, in your head, right? And I don't think also that people really honor the amount of energy that goes into like mental processes, right? And how much control we have over like, you know, how we think and how we view the world, right? And so chanting and affirmations is one of those mental modalities that people can use to take care of themselves, right? And so I know most of the time when people hear chanting, they think of like, you know, Buddhist chants. And like, I just want to open up people's just thinking around some of these terms, and right? And chanting could be something that has been passed down for centuries, right? A chant that I tell myself all the time is like, you got this, you can make it, right? You got this, don't stop, right? And that also falls in line with like in line with affirmations, right? Just reminding yourself that you know, you are the world and people are navigating around you, right? And that you're in control, right? And that you are loved and you are full of like abundance, right? Abundance is one of my favorite words, actually, that I've been just using a lot, because I think that we operate, especially as like Black women, especially Black women living with HIV, we operate from this place of like scarcity, right? And so I try my best to, as a way to just keep me in check, whenever I'm gifted something, I just remind myself that the universe is full of abundance, right? And that I have all the things that I need, even if I don't feel like I have them right now, right? Another mental modality is prayer. And like I said, opening up to what your own interpretation of what that looks like, right? It could be Christian prayer. It could be, you know, you could make salat in the masjid with everyone, right? You could do that alone. You could do that with a group of people, right? And so just really reclaiming and taking back some of these words that have been used in a really rigid way to tell us that we're not good enough, right? I know growing up for me, one of the biggest challenges was like, people are like, well, you don't pray. And I'm like, I talk to God all the time, right? But because it didn't look the way that they wanted it to look, they didn't feel like it was valid. And then number 3, my favorite one of all, my fiance has really helped me with this, even though it gets on my nerves sometimes, because although I will say that we do have the power to change things, I do not want to negate the fact that we are dealing with some real discrimination in this world, and that it sounds a lot easier to change our thought processes. And I'm pretty sure when you're going through it, you don't want somebody to be like, hey, you should just change your perspective, right? But for this PowerPoint, I think it would be really important for us to just challenge ourselves to change the way that we think. Someone posted something on Facebook that really irritated me. They posted a picture of a glass empty, and they were like, how are you going to pour into people if you ain't got nothing in the glass, right? And I looked at it and I was like, this is a wrong way of thinking, right? It assumes that we have to have something in order to give people things. And I don't believe that that's true, right? And so my post in response to that was, are you trying to drown people? Or are you trying to breathe life into people, right? So people would assume that because there's no water in the glass that it's empty, right? But there's air in the glass as well, right? So just thinking of just innovative ways in order to kind of like push back on a lot of things that people are saying. It kind of reminds me of that quote when people are like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. First of all, name a person in your life that you knew that pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, right? And so that's not a thing, right? But also, I understand how people have taken that term and have empowered themselves and taken it in a way to say, you know what? Yeah, life is hard, but I could pull myself up by however means, right? And so just really just thinking about ways in which that we can change the way in which that we navigate the world, right? How we think about the world and ourselves, right? And how the things that happen to us affect us. Not to minimize the fact that these things are happening and they're really horrible. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. So what is an altar? So when someone was like, you should build an altar, I was like, I'm not like religious like that to like build an altar, right? And so I had to do my own personal research and I had to expand my understanding of what an altar meant for me, right? And so on this slide, we see pictures, and I'm gonna preference that most of these pictures are from church, except for the one in the middle. So if you can follow my mouse, the picture on the left is a photo of a altar in a Catholic church. It's very big, very pretty, right? See all of the beautiful artwork on the walls, right? Very pretty, right? And so this is an altar that can, that tons of people have access to, that, you know, they can, you know, do whatever they need to do as far as like taking care of themselves, say a prayer, right? The one in the middle is a Hindu altar from a person's house, right? So you see this one is a little bit more small, right? And these are the altars that we're going to be talking about more so today, because these are ones that you can easily put together in your home. They don't take up a lot of space. But you see there's different trinkets, pictures, and candles on this altar, right? They have some live flowers, it looks like right here. And so I'm giving you these as examples to show that like there are many different forms of altars, right? And that altars don't have to be used in a religious context, even though I'm using religious pictures to talk about altars. And then this picture on the right is a altar from a Buddhist temple. I really like this picture because if you can see right here, they actually have a live plant that lives on their altar. I am a firm believer that I just think plants, anything that's alive is just that much more pretty. So I put live plants on my altar, and you can see here there's some oranges. I'm not really sure if they're for decoration or if they're leaving it as they're leaving it on the altar for like their ancestors, or if it means something. But also I also wanted to show that as an example. I know that I have friends who have altars where they actually put like food on their altars as a way to like give reverence to whoever that they are giving their offering to. So just really to think about really innovative ways to actually build an altar in ways that speak to who we are as individuals. My favorite slide, altars throughout history. So this actually came from my own personal understanding of altars being evolved, right? So I was like, well, you know, my ancestors built altars, right? My ancestors always didn't have like 4 walls to put their altar, you know, behind, right? They weren't always private. Sometimes in my ancestors' travels, right, they built an altar and they left it, right? So it just really made me think about like, like, let me get some like real tangible like ideas of like what altars look like. So as you can see on the left is a picture of Stonehenge, right? And it's in England. It's one of my favorite natural structures. I'm a firm believer that we as humans and as advanced as we are as a civilization, we will never understand what Stonehenge is or was, right? And I think that to me speaks more to the power of not only our ancestors, right? They knew what it meant. They knew why they built it, right? But we are spending so much time, energy, and money trying to figure out what this is, right? And I think that adds to the mystery, right? We'll never know, right? And so for me, I think it's just, it reminds me of how innovative our ancestors were and how technologically advanced that they were, even though that we say that now we're like living in the most technologically advanced society, right? People have speculated that Stonehenge is a burial ground, right? We'll never fully understand what that means until people who actually built Stonehenge wake up from the dead and say, actually, no, this is what Stonehenge was. So I like to use this just as an example is that altars show up in our lives, right? In natural ways and in unnatural ways, right? And so if you look to the right, you'll see a picture of the Giza Plateau, right? And you have 2 pyramids in the background, and you have the Sphinx. Multiple things on why I chose to pick this slide. One, I think it's very important to acknowledge as Black people that our ancestry, our practices, and our histories have been stripped from us, right? So some of these things that we will be talking about in this actual webinar will sound very foreign to us when they're not really, right? And so I wanted to also remind people that the pyramids are still standing. It's one of the 7 original wonders of the world that's still here, right? They were built by Black people. So we are powerful, we are great, we are full of greatness, right? And people are still trying to figure out exactly what the pyramids are, right? We understand them as monuments and as burial grounds, you know, for the pharaohs, right? But if you really start doing your research and you really start understanding the complexities of Egypt and why things are built in Egypt the way that they were, how connected to the stars they were, how connected to the ancestors they were, we had this in us, right, before it was stripped from us. So I really brought this slide to just remind people that we are from a civilization of greatness. These things are in us, and as a reminder to dispel this whole idea that these things are not accessible to us. Our ancestors were doing it. They were really great at doing it, right? Which is why white people came to Egypt and actually plundered and destroyed. If you look at the Sphinx, she's missing her nose, right? And I'm saying she, because I just think the Sphinx is a girl, and that might not be true. But we really need to just really be mindful of the way the anti-Blackness shows up in the world, that people felt it was just inappropriate for a monument that was built by Black people to have Black noses, right? And although people will tell us that the Sphinx nose is gone because of erosion, let's be very clear. If you look at the history of Egypt and you look at a lot of the monuments and a lot of the structures that come from Egypt, they're all missing their noses, right? Which, no shade, if you look at Black people, we are very distinctive and we are very known by our noses, right? So I will not say that it is a coincidence that the Sphinx is missing its nose, but also just encourage you and remind you all that we are part of greatness. Checking in with the chat, people. You know, when I saw a comment, one of the comments is, I believe there is a female and male principle in the universe. And so when I talk about the universe, I moved away from talking about God and Allah in a sense, because I felt like those names are very masculine, right? And don't really speak to the energy of us as women, right? Let's be very clear, like we have created, we have been taken care of, we have birthed nations, right? And also like reminding people too that I just don't like the way that people have co-opted this idea that like God is just one gender or the other and he can only be like a man, right? Because let's face it, like women give birth, right? In the womb, right, when we first start off as children, right, our bodies are female, right, and we either grow into being like females, right, or we grow into like being something else, right, and so like biologically speaking, right, and so like I just want to remind people too that like when I'm talking about like the universe or any type of like higher power, that to me that those people are gender nonconforming in my sense. So just expanding the way in which we think about these higher powers that we're like also referencing as well. Sorry. And so let's build an altar. So my altar is ever evolving. And I used this picture on the left. That was a picture actually of the altar that we built as a board, the PWM board during our retreat. Sorry, it got really hot. And so I was literally asked to host an exercise around building an altar at the meeting. And at first I was like, whoa, I'm not prepared. Like, you should have asked me like a couple of days in advance so I could have got something together. But then when I actually sat back and I thought about it, like I wasn't in a position to be prepared to heal, right? And so for me, and as someone who is like practicing and like owning the fact that I am a healer and just in many things that I do, I felt that it was my responsibility to at least share the knowledge that I had personally with my PWN sisters. So literally we built an altar. We had an altar exercise, and as we were doing the altar exercise, I just remember feeling like I wasn't enough, and that I wasn't giving people like complete information or like tangible information that they could take home to themselves. But when I asked everyone to bring an item for the altar, and we kind of went around in a circle and people talked about their personal items, it brought me to tears, because I was like, oh my gosh, like, you know, like here I was being afraid of like leading my sisters in this like healing session, right? And it turned out to be more beautiful and more fruitful for me. And it just kind of like solidified just my personal belief that like, regardless of everything that happens in the world, that I have the power to heal. It was healing not only for my sister. I think my sisters look at it as a like, oh, you did this like wonderful thing for us, but I don't really, I don't think my sisters in that space really understand the nuggets and the knowledge that I took from them when we were all like sharing. It was just a very beautiful thing. So I love my PWN sisters, and I just wanted to bring that in this space, right? And actually, this altar is the reason why that I'm actually here speaking to you all about just taking care of yourself. So I just like to have like reminders of things, and the universe really provides. On the right is a picture of a random altar that I pulled offline. And so I'm pulling just different images of like what altars look like and just what different healing modalities look like, so that people can understand that there is a plethora of ways in which that you can do this, right? And so, and just really moving away from this idea that like healing has to be perfect, right? And altar building has to be perfect as well, right? So your altar could be really elaborate, or it could literally be like one small thing in a corner, right? That you recognize that is like your spot in your space. So really, really, really encouraging people to just think outside of the box when it comes to like taking care of yourself and even building an altar. So what do we need? Everything. So the picture on the left is a picture of an altar. I believe it came from a church, right? And so like, I picked this picture because it actually has tons of things. And a couple of things that I don't have for my altar that I was like, dang, I wish I had that. So you see, we have like the candles, you have a lamp, right? And I do believe this lamp has oil in it that's burning. You have incense. You have this fan. So what most people don't know is there are several different ways in which that you can use sage. Some people burn it and wave it around, like so, right? Some people will burn it in a bowl or in a seashell and kind of like waft the smoke into them, right? As a healing. And then some people will use either feathers or fans made out of feathers to kind of like fan the actual smoke. I'm gonna burn some sage when we get done. When we get done, just to kind of, you know, send out some like good vibes and good intentions. And also know that like there's many ways in which you could do this. Don't let anybody talk you into that there's only one specific way to do these things, right? These are traditions that have been passed through generations, right? Through different cultures, right? So everyone has a different way in which that they do it. This bowl in the back is a singing bowl. You take the rod and you run it around the outside of the bowl, and it makes this really nice singing noise. I like to use it when I'm praying to kind of like center myself. The noise kind of like blocks out everything else and kind of just brings me into a calming space. And so these are some tools. These are some of the things that you could use for your altar. I'm going to show you all my altar in a moment, which I'm super excited about. So just know that this is a list of things, but these are not all of the things. And some things that we might need for our altar. We have crystals, right? Which I showed those earlier. Candles, which I love candles. I don't think people realize just how awesome candles are. Oils and incense, right? And so when we're talking about oils, right, I'm talking about oils that you burn, and I'm talking about essential oils, right? So lavender, you can buy lavender oil that you can burn, right? That's probably more than likely made with like synthetic materials, right? So it's probably made with like a lot of synthetic like fragrances and stuff. Also, to be mindful when you're buying oils, to just, if you have a scent allergy, to be mindful if you're actually buying 100% of an actual oil. I have friends who have bought oil before who have scent allergies, who can actually tolerate the actual natural oils, but because these other oils are like synthetic, that they end up having reactions to them. So like, know the difference between oils. And I always tell people too, that when you're talking about essential oils, don't let the price points of essential oils deter you from actually buying them. I have a bottle of lavender that's about like yay big, right? That someone gave it to me and I skimped on it because I thought it was gonna be gone in like 3 weeks. And when you really start to think about like essential oils, you only need like a dab. And some essential oils, especially the ones that I use for aromatherapy, I don't even like dispense them out of the bottle. I'll take them and like kind of like waft them around my nose to kind of get the smells. Lavender oil is one of my favorites. So just kind of like telling people the difference between like an essential oil and an oil that you would use to like burn, or like an oil that you would use to like a body oil that you would use, right? And know the difference. And then different kind of incense. I like to use incense because they remind me of the incense that were being burned in the masjid when we were praying. So for me, anytime that I need like peace, they smell good too, right? Anytime that I need like any type of peace or that grounding, if I don't have sage available, then I will burn an incense. And then number 4, statues and pictures. So I also want to open this up to like interpretation. So your statues can be real live statues, right? Or it could be something that's like important to you, right? And then pictures as well to decorate your altar. So like I said earlier, these are just some of the tools, right, that we would possibly need in order to start an altar. And just know that this list is not the end all list, and this list is like really expansive. Okay, so Bree's altar. Woo! So my altar journey was interesting. Literally, my altar started as a box, right? The box that I was given at a conference. And that box has now transformed into my travel altar. And I guess I could talk a little bit about, so the pictures that you see are my main altar, right? The altar that sits at my house, the altar that does not move unless I want it to move, right? And so for me, when I built my altar originally, I was having like separation anxiety because I travel so much for work. And so I remember becoming accustomed to like waking up every day, greeting my altar, looking at the things, lighting candles, right? And so like when I was traveling, I was just feeling a little incomplete. So the box that Harriet's Apothecary originally gave me now is my travel altar. So just to warn people, so anything that sits on my altar that I do not want lost, stolen, or damaged stays on my altar at home, right? Everything that's in my travel altar are things that could easily be replaced, things that are not sentimental, right? Things that remind me of the healing that I'm doing, and things that remind me of my altar at home, right? But things that I'm not as attached to. So I also want to remind people too that if you decide to build an altar, multiple altars, right, to just be very clear about the sentimental value of the things that you're putting on your altar, right? So my altar, I have a niece. I don't know if you can hear her crying in the background, but this altar sits in a specific room that I can close off because I just don't want, stuff happens, kids, pets, dogs, whatever the case may be. And so like just making sure that like you're setting up your altar in a way to make sure that your stuff is safe, right? And also when I built my first altar in my home, people were so intrigued by it that they would walk up to my altar and start like moving and grabbing things, right? And so I put my altar in a room where people don't have a lot of access to it because I set my stuff up in a way in which that's like convenient for me, right? And I don't want people like coming, moving stuff, and no shade. There's a lot of energy that people are carrying around that I just didn't want on my altar. So I had to move it in a place to make sure that it was still my own personal sacred space. And so My altar actually sits in a room that me and my fiance have deemed our healing room. So it's a quiet space with like a couch, some pillows on the floor. We have some yoga mats. So it's just the place where me and my fiance come and we do our healing, right? Sometimes we do it together, sometimes we do it separately, right? But I think it was very important for both of us as people who feel things very deeply to just have that space that we could just close off to the world and feel good about ourselves. And so this is part of that space in my altar. So as you can see, I'm going to show you the big picture, and I'm going to like break it down a little bit because my altar is huge. So you see the wooden base with all of my stuff, and I have pictures on the wall that are really important to me. And then there's a shelf up underneath full of books, right? And those books range anywhere from, I have multiple copies of the Bible, the Quran, different books that have like helped me on my own personal spiritual journey, yoga books, all types of crazy books. And so, sorry. So my altar, I'm trying to figure out what I want to talk about first. So my nephew, there's a picture of a green guy right here. And that's a picture that my nephew drew for me. My nephew is one of my favorite people in the world. And he's just like really supportive. And for him to be so young, he has just a really great grasp of like the world. And so I keep all of the things that he gives to me. So this was one of my favorite pictures that he drew because it's actually Link from The Legend of Zelda, which is my favorite video game. And how he knew that that was my thing at 5, I'll never know, but it was just very important. There's a picture at the top of Marsha P. Johnson, one of my like idols and like one of my like favorite Black trans women ever. And it's funny because when I first got this poster and I was like, I'm gonna put it on my altar. And I hung it up, and I found myself on a daily basis talking to Marsha. So I would come in my prayer room and like, good morning, Marsha. And I'd light my sage and I would say my little prayers and like, you know, and really just honor all of the things that are on my my altar. And like whenever I was down, needed encouragement, or felt like that I needed to get out of my own head or I needed to be humble, I would see that picture of Marsha and we would talk. And like literally, like it would just be me talking to this photo, right? But the love and the affirmations that I would get back from it just felt really good. So like also just want to encourage people to like do those things, right? Do those things that people normally would tell us are not right or like are crazy. Like we have connections to these people, right? And just because they're no longer with us doesn't mean that we still can't talk and communicate with them. On the left-hand side of this picture is my lovely tree that I got from my PWN sisters. So Nicole Seguin, one of the PWN members, actually drew this wonderful tree of us, and it has all of our names in it. So I think it's just really interesting because it's a tree, right? And trees are like rooted and grounded. My hair has roots like a tree, right? And so I just thought it was just really important because no shade, my PWN sisters keep me really grounded and keep me really rooted in the work, right? And so not only was this picture like really just sentimental to me, but it was something that I wanted to see on a regular basis because we know as like as Black women living with HIV, right, that we don't really get to see a lot of like positive examples that look like us. So I always wanted to make sure that my altar not only just reflected who I was as an individual, but also like brought in that energy and the spirit of the people who love and support me the most. And so on the right, you get getting a little bit closer into the altar. As you can see, my altar is behind me and it's empty. And I don't want you to think that I set this up and put all of this stuff away. I actually live in between two places, Albuquerque and Detroit. So I have my travel altar in my room and my real altar is in Albuquerque. So it doesn't look like this anymore. I didn't have enough time to actually set it up in between like moving and trying to get back to Detroit. So these are the pictures, but I also wanted to acknowledge the fact that this is just empty. So back to the altar. So I have a picture of my dad and my grandfather, right? I have beads for Puerto Rico. My fiance is Dominican, and it was just really so he gave me these bracelets, and I think it just kind of reminds me that, like, as Black people who are doing the work in this country, like, it just really reminded me that, like, that there are other Black people in the world, right? And just because they don't live in America and they don't look like me, that I still need to, like, make sure that I, like, stand up and support for them. So I put it around a candle, and I light that candle just as a way to, like, say prayers specifically for Puerto Rico, right? There's Jericho Rose in this jar right here, and I think that that's a really dope, something that's really helped me. So Jericho Rose, long story short, it comes from the desert, and it looks like tumbleweed, right? So it's like balled up in a ball, like so, and it only takes a little bit of water to, like, bring it back to life and to open it up, and they live for long periods of time. So I like to use my Jericho Rose as a way to kind of, like, clear the space, right? I use it too as a way to kind of, like, remind me of, like, the life and death cycle, right? So you get to see this Jericho Rose, like, literally come back to life from the dead and then die again, right? But it's not really dying, it's just dormant. So I just think it's just really appropriate for my altar. As you can see in the purple box, I have my PWM membership card, my Black Woman's Blueprint membership card, and some other items that were given to me. There's a placard I got from a professor I worked for when he went to Kenya. I thought that was important because, and this shelf is actually my shelf that's kind of dedicated to Africa. So I have my placard from Kenya, and then I have this really pretty bracelet, this really pretty necklace from South Africa, right? So I felt it was just appropriate to put those together. And remember when I was talking earlier about you could really put anything on your altar? My nephew drew this, my nephew painted this for me when he was 3, right? You see these glow sticks right here? We had an event in Detroit, TSOCP, and these are glow sticks that are actually the same color as the trans flag. So I just kind of kept them to kind of just remember my trans folks. This cat was actually given to me by a coworker of mine who went to Japan, and because she knew I lived in Japan, she brought me something back, which, fortune cat, right? So I put it on my altar, not only to remind me of her, but also to remind me of my time in Japan. And then there's this watch right here. It's actually a watch. I'm not sure where it's from, but it says it's an HIV awareness watch. And I just put that on there as a way to remind me, like, I got HIV, and guess what? I got time too. So keep it moving. Yes, Vanita? We're almost on time. I can't. Oh, we are on time, right? Sorry, Vanita. Hold on. We need to wrap up. Okay, wrapping up really quickly. Okay, sorry, y'all. Okay, so we're gonna be cutting out soon. Sorry. Really quickly, just a couple more pictures of the altar and things that you could put on it, right? I have my Quran, I have my tarot cards, and then pictures I showed you earlier, and then just a picture of, like, some of the candles burning and everything. So like I said, these are just tools that you can use to build an altar. I'm pretty this is being recorded, so if you need any of this information, you need to go back to it. Like, it's more than accessible. And then also, as a board member, like, I'm also, like, willing to help people kind of talk through what that process looks like for them, or give them, like, tips and pointers. But I just want to give 5 steps really quickly before we end for building your sacred space. 1 is clear your energy. You can use sage. You can do that with affirmations. You can clear your energy any way in which that feels comfortable for you. 2, set your intentions, right? Let the universe know what you want and expect the universe to give it back to you. 3, prepare your altar space. So it depends. If your altar is like a stationary altar, you might not have to set it up, right? Preparing your altar may look like lighting candles and burning an incense, right? 4, create your altar, right? So in the creation, like I just want people to just be really creative and think outside of the box in ways in which that you can build an altar. I also want to remind people you could build an altar indoors, you can build an altar outdoors, you could build an altar with plants. It could look exactly how you want it to look. Be as creative as possible. And number 5, bless your altar, right? In several different ways. My way of blessing my altar is to constantly keep engaged with it, talk to my altar, and treat it as if it's a living and breathing thing, because honestly, the energy that's in my altar is living and breathing. So thank you all for your time. I know that was like really quick at the end. This was amazing. And like I said, I just want to remind people that even though I was in a position to be able to talk to you all, I want to thank everybody for your comments, for your love and your affirmations. I was reading some of the notes, and this experience has benefited me just as much as it's benefited you all. So I want to thank you all again. Thank you, Vanita, and thank you, Vanessa, for allowing me the opportunity to share all of this wonderful information with Black women. I love Black women. And I thank you all for taking out the time to join us, and thank you all for your work and your sacrifices.
Bree, that was awesome. From the time you started, I have been in a state of just kind of brimming over here, just kind of staying emotional.
Excellent. Vanessa.
Yeah, especially as you talked about what we did at the board retreat. And so this was really special. And for you to share your space with us, I want to really thank you for that. So you all, we can bring Bree back another time, because I think we just kind of touched the tip here. And again, like I told you, the Black Women Living with HIV work group, stay tuned for updates. We meet the second, we have a call the second Monday of every month, 4 p.m. Central, and I'll get confused if I keep going over, but email anyone at PWN and you can get on that list. And Bree, thank you. That was so special. You did way more than I totally expected, so I am so overwhelmed. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. We didn't have time for questions, but I'm just seeing all your blessings. And so thank you, everybody.
See you
have a wonderful day.
See ya. Speak out, ladies.
No. Bye. All right, good. Namaste, everybody.
Namaste.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Ah.